Hi, welcome to lecture 4, the final lecture of social influence. So after this main lecture, you're going to be seeing different examination answers. So actual written up 12 mark, 8 mark, 6 mark questions. So we're going to be focusing on social change, and in the social part, they love asking the question about social change, and a lot of people get quite confused about what kind of things they need to include. So I would say do not learn any more research for this particular section, because what we know already we can use to answer this particular question. So what is social change? So you need to know the definition, which is in green, about what social change is. So this is when society adopts or takes in a new way of thinking. Yeah, so let's look, for example, about homosexuality. Before, society didn't adopt that or take that as the norm. They saw it as abnormal and people being mentally ill. And eventually, society has now taken that in and adopted the belief of it being okay, and they've accepted it as a norm, where we now have same-sex marriages, etc. So it's now widely accepted. So this is the whole thing about adopting. So you need to kind of know what is social change. And the next part of social change you need to know is that how the minority, so before then we've only been looking at majority influence, how we're able to change our views and behaviors based on what everybody else is doing. But social change focuses on how the minority is able to create this new way of thinking or new belief, and um, is able to change society's current thinking. So they challenge society's current thinking. So what happens is a few people don't agree with what the majority are doing, and they try to now establish a new norm by and they try to get their views to become the majority view. So minority also has a big influence on changing people's behavior. So, how social change happens? If you stick to this principle, you will not go wrong in this particular question. Yeah. So Moscovici, again, you don't need to remember his name, but Moscovici was a person that kind of termed how social change actually happened, and he's the one that said that social change isn't just influenced. So people are not just influenced by the majority, but they can also be influenced by the minority. And how this happens is through a process called conversion. Yeah, first keyword. And what happens, I've done a lot of mnemonic now, so you're able to try and remember the different principles of conversion. So devices that can talk. Yeah, does it make sense? Who cares? You just think of your mobile phone that can talk. So first things first is this minority group. Say, for example, we've got the suffragettes. They draw attention to an issue, and they drew these suffragettes to draw attention to the fact that women were not able to vote. Women did not have equal rights for men. Women couldn't do certain things in society. So they drew attention to this issue, and what happened is this started to this starts to create a conflict in the majority. A few people in the majority, and they're thinking of like, that's interesting what they're saying. A bit like how, if you remember, a few years ago, where we had the fathers dressed up in hero outfits standing on the walls of Parliament, and they're trying to fight for justice for them to be able to have the same right to see their children as the parents. Yes, so that kind of creates a conflict in people's minds about what they originally know, and they'd be like, this is a different kind of thinking now. And what happens is the next stage is the role of conflict. That is the suffragettes or fathers for justice or the black civil rights movement. What happens is they kind of protest. Yeah, they do some kind of protest or demonstration, like the suffragettes, for example. They continuously protested. They went to prison. They done so much different stuff basically, and it gets people thinking. It gets people to really have a bigger conflict inside their brain in terms of maybe the original majority thought may not be so correct. So it's through the role of conflict that you're continuously being conflicted in your original thoughts. And the next step is researchers found out that psychological research especially has found out that if the minority group are consistent in their views, like if every single time they're saying exactly the same thing, so votes for women, votes for women, votes for women, they're not saying votes for dogs, votes for cats, votes for women, and then votes for cats again. They're continuously saying the same thing and being consistent. If we know that they're consistent, then that also contributes to conversion. And then we have the augmentation principle. And this is if the minority influence are willing to suffer for their particular cause, it makes the conversion even bigger. So if people can start seeing that, oh my gosh, these people are willing to die for what they believe, it makes people want to start believing things even more. And eventually people will move from the majority thinking into the minority. And the more and more people that move from the majority to the minority, it then everyone now becomes a majority thinking. Hence why we now have, for example, votes for women, votes for Black Americans, or just Black people in general. And then Fathers for Justice are going to be doing the same thing eventually because they're going to go through this process. Yes, it can take very long, but eventually, once it's changed and it's a majority thinking, a bit like what happened with the homosexuality, where somebody drew an attention to an issue in terms of why can't men have the same rights? Why can't homosexual couples have the same rights as heterosexual couples? And because they kept protesting, they kept having gay rights marches, and they had the whole thing about the rainbow colours and a symbol of gay, lesbian, bisexual, and trans. They started to really, really protest, and because they're consistent and because they're willing to I don't know, I'm not sure how they've done an augmentation principle, but they're willing to suffer for their rights basically. They suffered all sorts of homophobic abuse, um, hate crimes, all those kind of stuff. But because people saw this and are really fighting for what they believe, so eventually what's happened is now we've now seen this conversion. So the minority thinking has now become the majority thinking, where we see it's okay for homosexual people to get together and to get married now in society. And that is all you need to know for how social change happens. That is it. So our next lecture, finally, we're going to be looking at 4A, which is key examination questions on social change. And you're going to be looking at devices that can talk to be able to answer any type of examination question that they can throw at you.